Good morning and welcome to our third panel session of the day, titled Harnessing New Technology to Strengthen Our National Resilience and Economic Security. We will explore two key themes. One, how can we maximize the opportunities offered by key technologies such as AI, distributed ledger technology, and quantum computing to bolster resilience and economic security, whilst also managing the transforming threat landscape? And two, whether our regulatory frameworks are fit for purpose to accommodate this technological revolution. As we saw just this week in the Industrial Strategy and the Digital and Technology Sector Plan, the UK government is seeking to grasp these issues. So our conversation today is extremely timely. My name is Kirsten Mycroft, the Chief Privacy and Data Ethics Officer at BNY, and I'm delighted to be joined by four distinguished panelists. Lilia Christofi, EMEA Data and AI Financial Services Partner at PwC UK, Federico Iaschi, Information Security Director at Starling Bank, Chris Scott, UK Head of Cyber Solutions at Aon, and Suman Ziaullah, Head of Technology, Resilience and Cyber at the FCA. So let's start with a question that I'd like to hear from each of you on, please. In your roles, how are you seeing emerging technologies increasing the speed, scale, or sophistication of cyber threats to financial institutions? And how do you expect that to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? Federico, I'll come to you first.
Okay, thank you for having me. And so in my position at Starling, I am at the forefront of seeing how these emerging technologies, such as AI, are reshaping the threat landscape, and these changes are very, very fast, and they are profound. They are particularly in terms of scale and speed and sophistication. And the adoption of AI has accelerated this arms race between defenders and attackers, where we are now seeing malicious actors using AI and emerging technologies to launch attacks at a speed that until now was unimaginable, I would say. What we believe that, however, these threats extend beyond the financial services, financial institutions themselves, and directly to our customers. We are seeing AI used to create fictional content that is very, very difficult for a customer, for people to distinguish between what is real and what is fake. And this is a significant concern from a fraud and bank impersonation perspective. We, at Starling, we are mindful of threats such as AI cloning, when malicious actors can mimic voice of a loved one in a distress call. To counter this, we believe in empowering our customers. And as part of our support to the Home Office Stop Think Fraud campaign, we launched our own initiative called Safe Phrases, where we encourage our people to agree to a safe word, a safe phrase with family members. And so if they receive a suspicious call asking for money, no matter that is the main message, no matter how convincing that may sound, they can use that safe word or safe phrase just to verify the identity of the caller. And we believe that this is a simple, pragmatic step that gives power back to the customers, to the consumers. So looking ahead 5 to 10 years, as you asked, I expect these threats to accelerate. We can expect AI, for example, AI-driven attacks being more autonomous and more personalized. There is the issue with quantum computing that, while still in its nascent age or era, will pose a significant threat to our encryption standard. That, in simple words, is like that the locks we use to protect our information will be broken. As Starling, as a digital-first bank, we are acutely aware of these threats, and our strategy is proactive defense, continuous monitoring, but as well, as I mentioned earlier, fostering a strong security culture, continuing to educate our customers to feel more safe in navigating this new reality.
Great, thank you. And Chris, in your view, what does all of this mean for firms? We've heard some about Starling Bank, but if you take a broader perspective from your client base.
Yeah, I mean, I think, ultimately, for every sort of dark use of technology, there's a light side of use of technology. And we spoke about how AI could enable advanced social engineering, sort of crawling of networks and that sort of thing. Ultimately, we're seeing organizations use it to sort of supplement and increase their defense capability as well, which is always positive. I think the other thing that Federico alluded to, and I think it's really important to remember, is the human factor in all of this. So, we often refer to the human in the loop being the sort of the major point of vulnerability. And I think it's important to remember that when we're talking about sort of cyber attacks, cyber threats, it's not just a technology problem. A lot of the time, it's a human issue. I think it's something like 97% of all cyber attacks start with some form of human error, whether that be clicking on the link, whether that be misconfiguration of sort of external vulnerabilities, that sort of thing. So, for me, what firms need to understand is that any sort of controls, process, procedure, whether that be technical or otherwise, it has to support the human in the loop. And often that's about giving them time, putting breaks between them and the sort of urgency that actors are trying to engender so that they can pause, reflect, or even check and challenge their assumptions. And I think, you'll see firms looking to target things like out-of-band verification. I like the safe word or the safe phrase. We are going to have to start to look at some of these non-technical ways of validating and authenticating people. So, for me, it's that, how do we support the human in the loop, whether that be via technology or otherwise?
Great, thank you. And Lilia, in your experience, are firms adapting to these new risks? And how well are they doing, and what more may be needed?
I want to take a little bit of a step back and then I'll go into the firm, but I think this is a multi-pronged engagement that we need to create between hyperscalers like the likes of Microsoft, AWS, and so on, who are obviously delivering a lot of the infrastructure, and then the regulators, as well as then the firms. Because if we don't, and that's firms cross-industry, by the way, that's not in a particular industry, because we can learn a lot about consumer behavior, to your point around behaviors, and share actually insights of how we're tackling this across the whole pack. If we start mining that intelligence and creating that collaboration, then the firm's job becomes a lot easier, because then we are really starting to educate customers at every level, not just when they're engaging, for example, with a financial services institution, but overall. And we are baking that into also the solution delivery. Now, the issue that we have in a lot of firms that I've been working with is adopting the new technologies that are coming out. It's really slow. It's reliant on the CISO teams, on the IT central team to onboard that technology, vet that it's safe, and so on. And usually those technological components, having come from a product company previously, are more resilient and they are more secure. But there is a level of apprehension in a lot of organizations to adopting that tech. And the pace of which you're adopting versus the bad, actors who are experimenting with that tech, with that tech and attacking you with that tech, has to kind of even and balance out, because otherwise you're facing onto a much larger threat from a technology capability point of view than what your organization can actually handle. And that's a massive challenge. And I just want to come back to something you said there, Chris, around, AI is starting to be able to mimic a human. The distinction between a human engagement to an AI engagement is very different. So in the past, we would have built forms, you fill in a form, you can put certain controls around the form, which is a structured way of engaging with that consumer. Now, when you're engaging in a ChatGPT style platform, you can put anything in there. So the predictability of what the answer is and how you treat that answer is very different. So, cyber attacks come with the injections, but also trying to just mine data. And data privacy becomes a much bigger thing, because if I don't have those level of controls, let's say when I'm speaking to a retailer, I'm sharing my data with the retailer, but the controls exist in my financial services provider, I've already got half the information I need to start penetrating into that secondary provider. And that's why that cross-industry view is really important.
Yeah.
The only thing I was going to say, I was just going to sort of build on that for a second, because I think, when we talk about these new technologies, and particularly AI, ChatGPT, et cetera, your employees are going to be using them. So what you need to do is make sure they understand how to use them safely, what they can and cannot do with those tools. And you're absolutely right. Because there's no longer a structured form which defines the response, people can put, they can put personally identifiable information through, they can reveal passwords, names of pets, or whatever secret passcode it may be, right?
Secret word.
Exactly, yeah, quite. That education piece and that sort of, when you're talking about security, people often think it's about blocking people from doing stuff. Often it's about enabling them to use tooling or technology in a safe and secure fashion.
Yeah. Before I come to you, Suman, I was just going to comment on one thing you said, Lilia, about the pace of adoption of these new technologies in companies. And I think they will feel additional pressure from their own employees who are experimenting with these technologies outside of the workplace. So that's another factor to consider there. So I think we're all interested to hear from your perspective, Suman, as a regulator on this topic.
Yeah, sure. So I think the question was really around what the next 5 to 10 years looks like, and from the regulator's perspective, if I draw upon something that Nikhil mentioned this morning, we've issued our 5-year strategy, our new 5-year strategy in March of this year, and part of that strategy, one of the key themes of that strategy is about deepening trust. What are we talking about? We're talking about operational resilience, we're talking about cyber resilience, and that's an absolutely core part of deepening trust. We need to make sure that we're deepening trust that customers can have in firms and the financial services that they provide. Against all sorts of scenarios, whether that be cyber attacks, IT outages, third-party failures, power outages, all those things that can happen. Now, we know that trust is very quick to be broken, and it can be very hard to build and to rebuild. And so, just really to echo the points that the panel have already mentioned, we're also seeing that there are some really increasing challenges in this space, and as we're foreseeing over the next 5-10 years, that's only likely to grow. This is, and I say this cautiously, this is probably the hardest time, and it's harder than ever to maintain an operational resilience and cyber resilience for your firms right now. We're very conscious of that. We're seeing a rising number of incidents being reported to us, operational incidents. We're seeing 1 in 5 of those incidents are cyber related. NCSC have been repeatedly flagging now that there's this, and warning about a widening gap between the capabilities of the cyber threat actors and the resilience that we have with which to combat that. And then, of course, we build in the emerging tech, the emerging technologies that have opportunities and also can make profound implications to our resilience, as Federico mentioned quantum earlier. So I'll just say the key point here, and if you took one thing away from everything that I say today, the key point here is really we need firms, and I'm speaking to the firms that are in the room right now, we need firms to be investing in your operational resilience and to really be focusing on this, but we also need you to be looking ahead. And as you're looking to try and adopt and adapt your approaches to integrate emerging technologies like AI, like quantum, those opportunities that exist, we really need that investment in your operational and cyber resilience to accelerate and keep pace with that adoption as well.
Thank you. So in the context of these developing threats, how are global tensions and supply chain complexity affecting the resilience of our financial systems? And what should firms be doing to prepare? Chris, perhaps you can kick this one off, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, geopolitical tensions probably haven't been higher for a number of years. And I think that we've seen that reflected in the threat landscape. So we have had quasi-nation state threat actors that have clearly been looking to target sort of critical infrastructure of various different entities. On both sides, I should add, it's not all one-way traffic. And I think that, you know, the geopolitical tensions has filtered into the way in which people need to approach the management of their supply chains as well. You know, a not too distant example was DeepSeek versus OpenAI, which was very much characterized as a sort of US versus China style sort of, you know, battle of technology. I think, you know, there's always nuance to anything that's been sort of characterized so black and white. But I think you need to be aware that shift in geopolitical tensions and sort of, you know, major countries' views on what is or isn't acceptable technology can, you know, and should factor into your selection of technology partners. I think where possible, you should be thinking about multi-vendor style approaches, certainly to some of these sort of emerging technologies whilst they're still sort of growing. And I think, you know, people need to be reactive, right? They need to collaborate to understand what sort of current indicators of compromise there are from a sort of threat actor perspective. You need to be working very closely with government institutions where appropriate to get that sort of canary in the coal mine style sort of warning. And it just needs to be baked into the speed and adaptability of their, you know, technology and incident response teams. Because, you know, as I think Federico alluded to, speed is the thing that sort of really kills at the moment. So we need to be fast in the way in which we sort of look to adapt.
Thank you. And Suman, how's the FCA working to address these challenges?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk about a bit of both, a bit what we want firms to be doing, but also about what we as the FCA are doing, if I might. So we know that there's some increasing dependencies on very complex supply chains, growingly complex supply chains, right? We've seen this as firms and as industries continue to innovate, as continue to try to be ever more efficient. There's an ongoing increased dependency on third parties, and many of those third parties exist outside the UK. Exactly as Chris said, that puts some real vulnerabilities and dependency on some of the geopolitical tensions that may arise. So we're also seeing that in terms of the incidents that are being reported to us, and 40% of incidents that are reported to us are cite third parties as the primary cause. Almost half of those incidents are cyber-related. We're seeing that echoed in all the conversations that we're having with industry, be that in our in CMORG, in CCGs. These are various industry regulatory bodies that we have. So there's two parts to this. One of them is what do we want firms to be doing, and the other one's what we're doing. And on what we want firms to be doing is, we've been really clear about this. We want firms to be taking the same level of attention to third-party delivered services as you are to the services that are delivered by your own internal systems. So that means you can outsource your services to a third party, but you can't outsource your responsibility for how those services are being delivered. Asking the same questions, conducting the same levels of tests on those third parties, on their resilience, really understanding that they've got the right controls, the right capabilities, the right governance around how those services will be provided. But on our side, there's been quite a lot. So I'll describe this quite quickly. Some of the things that we've been doing has been about building more data. And I heard the last panel talking a lot about the importance of data. So we've been looking to build through better data from firms, a better understanding of where there are third-party dependencies that could pose a systemic risk to the sector. We've published a consultation paper last December, which we're in the process of reviewing the responses from, and that will really just help us understand where there are those dependencies that we really need to pay very close attention to, we and firms can pay attention to. We're also looking for increased reporting coming from firms on operational incidents that you're incurring, and that's to make it easier for firms to understand what you need to report, when you need to report it, and how you report it to us. So it's easier to report that in a more seamless, hopefully simpler and less burdensome way. But then beyond that, we're also looking at a slice of third parties, and these are the critical third parties, a slice of key third parties that could also pose systemic risk to our financial sector. So if there are those key third parties that, for example, we might have concentrated dependency upon, a large number of firms all using the same third parties, or indeed in other ways, we've got those key third parties, if they were to incur a disruption, then that would cause a systemic issue. And then we're also looking at how we can take a direct view of their resilience, the resilience of those services that we depend upon as a sector. And built within that regime, within the critical third parties approach that we've developed and published last November, is really to try to promote the effective information sharing between those third parties, but also with us as regulators and with firms that are their clients.
Thank you. So the bar is high, but you're also doing your bit.
We are trying.
Okay, so I think so far we've focused on the risks primarily that these technologies are presenting. However, the opportunities for our industry are also huge. So if we start with you, Federico, maybe you could tell us, what are some of the promising, or just give us one example of the most promising use cases you're seeing from your role or across the industry where technology can help bolster the industry's approach to resilience and economic security.
So, whilst the risks are real, we know that, the opportunities, as you said, that technology like AI presents to bolster resilience and economic security are immense. And we at Starling, we recognize the value of AI early on, and we've been using a scale for services for our customers. One of the promising use case is in the fight against fraud. We employ sophisticated AI models specifically to detect and prevent authorized push payment fraud. And the ability that this model has to detect very complex and subtle data patterns that a human simply couldn't or would take significant amount of time to do that has directly contributed to an increase of 36% of fraud detection rate. And this, we believe, is a tangible example of how using AI can improve how we protect customers' money. Most recently, probably most excitingly, we have started putting AI in our customers' hand. We launched a feature called Spending Intelligence, which allows our customers to ask questions in natural language about their finances, such as how much did I spend on grocery last year, and receive an instant analysis. So yes, this is just the first phase for us to integrate. Our plan is to integrate AI across all customer touch points. And we see a huge potential to doing that. And we believe that the most promising use cases are not just those that protect, but also those that empower our customers.
Right, thank you. And Lilia, what do these new opportunities mean in terms of the structure of our industry, and how might that change as technology becomes more ingrained or we adopt it more?
I think we are seeing, especially in financial services, that table stakes are there, and so we need to ideate beyond that. So if we think about financial service institutions of the future, they're there to help you build wealth and generate revenue and income, and also to be able to help you steer the hordes of data that is just available at such a huge amount that it's humanly not possible to kind of sift through what you need to know versus what you don't need to know. So if we talk about the supply chain, intelligence that we want to build, or the risk intelligence that we want to build, these are really good use cases, because what you can do is you can start taking all those market signals and tailoring them to your risk frameworks and things that you care about, or tailoring them to the types of insights that you want to generate and apply, which then creates a financial services institution of the future that is more flexible and dynamic to the market conditions, so that you are able to cater for the volatility that most industry sectors are now obviously experiencing. That increases your resilience as a firm in that sector, but it also very highly impacts the resilience of all the firms that you're banking with, and allowing them opportunities and ways in which they can shift the dynamic around their supply chain and make good decisions on how best to utilize that and what's available to them. So I think that's really powerful. To date, those institutions are buying that data, but they're not doing anything with it. And we're being very restrictive in the way that we share those insights, and it almost is becoming the golden nugget, I guess, for institutions. And that's why, a lot of that innovation is sort of kept under the hood and not really widely shared, but I do see that becoming a repeatable trend. And I wasn't planning to say this, but I thought it's so funny when you mentioned fraud. There is this one use case that came out that was, wasting scammers' time. And they've made this clueless old lady that is obviously an AI responding. And I thought, innovations like that seem quite endearing in a way, but quite powerful deterrent. So thinking outside of the box and being creative with what you have is just, there's so much to be done.
A lot of scope, isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay, and we all know that proportionate, predictable, and effective regulation is key to unlocking these opportunities while managing the risks. So, Suman, could you provide us with an overview of the current state of play in the UK? How is the FCA supporting safe innovation, and what's coming next?
Yeah, sure. Let me try to. So, thank you. Our approach as the FCA is really to be outcomes focused and pro-innovation, and also technology neutral. We heard when we were listening to the EST speech just before this panel, actually, about how important it is that we're all doing our piece to try and encourage and support growth. Now, what we see is that by taking that outcomes-focused approach, it really gives us and firms the flexibility to adapt to technology changes, to market developments, and we think that is really the best way to support UK growth and competitiveness, because it allows the space for firms to innovate whilst also managing their risks. So operational resilience is a good example of this. We're looking in how we're asking firms to approach their operational resilience. We're looking for firms to take the appropriate risks around their innovation, but with resilient foundations, so that they can manage the disruptions when they arise. And they really need to make sure that resilience is seen as a mindset incorporated from the beginning, collaborating and knowledge sharing throughout, and also continuously investing in their operational resilience. But let me talk about two specific areas of particular innovation. One of them is around AI, and the other one's around quantum. So on AI, as we set out in our growth letter to the PM in January, we're not intending to introduce additional regulations around AI. We think that our existing frameworks, things like consumer duty, the SMCR, our operational resilience requirements, we think that those are sufficient for us to be able to look at the safe and responsible use of AI. We set that out in our AI update in April of 2024, so April last year. But alongside that, what we're doing is we're working really closely with industry to try to ensure that they have the clarity they need to be able to innovate and to adapt to the speed, the complexity, the scale that AI is bringing. And there's a whole series of things that we're doing around AI Spotlight showcases, AI sprints, AI live testing services, and AI consortium with the Bank of England, and in fact our supercharged sandbox that we've recently announced with NVIDIA as well. But I really want to also talk about quantum. Federico mentioned it, and this is huge, right? And this is an area that we, the FCA, have been taking a really a proactive stance on as well. And the quantum presents both opportunities, huge opportunities in the way in which the compute will be able to be done differently and way more powerfully, but it also is presenting a really, really significant challenge. And I'd note that the NCSC have described this as something similar to Y2K, but harder. And one of the reasons why that's harder is because actually there isn't a set timeline with which to, as the final deadline by which we have to do this. But what that means is that, just imagine it, sensitive information being able to be decrypted and therefore accessed freely. And all firms have sensitive information, of course we do, right? And the NCSC have actually set out some timelines for this. And I'll just highlight, within those timelines, by 2031, they've said that that firms need to have carried out their highest priority quantum migration activities, so transition to quantum secure by 2031, and by 2030 in their highest priority services, and by 2035 to have completed all migration. And they noted that the financial services should be looking at earlier adoption even than those timelines, and to also have coordinated internationally. Now, I have to say, as a resilience professional and someone who's been looking at this for some time, that is not long. That is really not long. And we're also concerned because we've been conducting surveys, we've asked firms how they're doing up this, and the surveys that we've been conducting are reporting back to us that firms are underprepared, and they've made limited progress to date in terms of readiness for the quantum transition. So collaboration is going to be absolutely key to how we try and solve this. We need to have regulators and firms and third parties and academics all working together, and we're doing an awful lot in that space. But we're also embedding quantum transition questions and discussions into our regulatory engagements with firms, so that we're understanding how firms are preparing themselves ready for this challenge.
Thank you. Time is flying by, so I thought we'd better turn to the iPad to see if there are any questions. And there's one that actually overlaps with the question I was going to ask next, so that's fortunate. Is there a sufficiently joined-up approach between regulators, government and industry, given the likely increased threat in the years ahead from state and non-state actors? Is a whole-of-society approach really realistic? I don't know if anybody would like to take that specifically?
I would say that so effective collaboration between industries and government is not just a nice to have, is a fundamental, okay? And we, at Starling, we are very encouraged by the government, was mentioned earlier, the AI Opportunities Action Plan, and the proactive tech positive strategy that the regulators are showing. And we believe that this is setting a promising foundation for AI thriving landscape ecosystem in the UK. We think that the industry engagement so far has been excellent, and there are a lot of committee and collaborative committees such as the Cross-Market Operational Resilience Group, I'm just reading, and the AI Task Force. A great example is that the Chief Information Officer of Starling, Harriet Rees, is part of the Bank of England AI Task Force and the AI Consortium, as we mentioned earlier. And this, I believe, that is very, very good, because it is helping how to ensure that the financial services perspective is heard, and that is very, very important. And as well, focusing not only on the risks, we know that there are risks, but also on the opportunities that emerging technologies and this transformative potential can bring to our services. We believe that we will need to improve and just create more formal or informal channels where banks, tech firms, regulators, government bodies are together and they're sharing information and best practices on adoption of AI. We can do more, but we are very, very encouraged by how the landscape is looking at.
Excellent, thank you. I wish we could carry on. I've certainly thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, but unfortunately we have to wrap up now. I think we've heard loud and clear that technology isn't just a risk, it's a crucial part of our defense and a contributor to economic growth. And if we get the balance right, the opportunities are huge. We should continue to focus on regulating for outcomes rather than applying prescriptive rules that can limit future benefits. And the best way forward would be for collaboration, a collaborative relationship between government, regulators, and industry. A big thank you to my panelists for sharing their valuable time and insights today, and thanks to all of you in the audience for joining this important conversation.